Welcome to episode 28 of Travelling Science. Welcome to Travelling Science, the podcast that's sharing science with the world. My name's Crowe and I'm the travelling scientist, coming to you today from Melbourne University in Australia. I'm a health science communicator, and on this podcast, we interview doctors, researchers, and experts, hearing their stories and sharing their ideas that can help us to live smarter, happier, and healthier lives. This week's guest is Dr. Jarrod McKenna, reproductive biologist, science communicator, and TEDx speaker. His PhD research focused on female reproductive health, but Dr. McKenna has a broad range of scientific knowledge, and he loves making the difficult scientific concepts accessible and fun and interesting for anybody and everybody who's interested. He's been on this podcast before in episode 3 titled Periods, Penises and Pregnancy. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. But recently, Jarrod has just returned from an expedition to Antarctica, and I'm sure he's got some new knowledge bombs to drop on us today. So we're going to be talking about how Antarctica impacts our lives, why krill and plankton are so important, what albedo is and why we should do something about it, why whale pregnancies are going down, how avian flu could be killing all the penguins, and how cold Antarctica really is. And we're also going to be discussing things like ocean currents, sea ice, overfishing, whale babies, penguins, seals, and what you can do to help Antarctica preserve our oceans and keep our planet cool. So without further ado, let's get straight into this conversation with an absolute lord, Dr. Jarrod McKenna. Welcome to Travelling Science, my friend.
Thanks for having me back, Jesse.
No worries. Thanks so much for coming back, and let's get straight into it. You've just come back from Antarctica, the final frontier, an incredible place that not many people get to go. Can you tell us a bit about it? Like, why did you go there and what did you experience?
Absolutely. You said it. You know, I'm incredibly privileged to be able to have gone to Antarctica. It's such a faraway place for so mmany people. It's such an expensive place to get to. And yeah, I'm very, very lucky to go on there once in my life. You know, multiple people, or most people in the world never go at all. So having gone once is already an immense privilege. So it's always been something that a place that I've always wanted to go and see. You know, who doesn't want to see penguins and whales and things like that? But going to Antarctica is more than a bucket list item for me, and thankfully quite a lot of people that go as well. It's once you realize how beautiful and grand and majestic and breathtaking, you know, insert another superlative, it really does sort of change you, and it sort of convinces you to help Antarctica in some sort of way. And for me, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go as well. I really wanted to see firsthand what's happening in Antarctica and how I could help. So that's one of the reasons why I ended up going.
Incredible. And how long were you there for?
So, well, my whole trip from Melbourne to the Antarctic Peninsula was about 2 weeks. I think it was 14 days, but that's me traveling to Buenos Aires and then to Ushuaia, which is the southern tip of Argentina, and then a 2-day boat trip from Ushuaia to Antarctica. And I'll also add that there's 2 days across the roughest sea in the world called the Drake Passage. And for me anyway, I was very lucky that it was quite calm. Okay. For many people, it is absolutely not calm. So we only had 3-meter waves there and back, which is absolutely nothing compared to the size, you know, of the boats that go there. It's just like a paddling pool. Yeah. But on the trip after me, you know, the boats were experiencing 12-meter waves. So the complete other end of the spectrum.
So if you struggle with seasickness, that's definitely something you should consider before going to Antarctica.
Absolutely. Take that into consideration. You know, even with the 3-meter waves, people were getting sick because the boat was still rocking around a little bit with 3-meter waves. So definitely something to think about if you're planning a trip to Antarctica. But once we got there, we had 4 full days and then kind of a half day at the end as well. And then followed by another 2 days back and then another probably 2 more days getting back to Melbourne. So it's a huge process to get there, even from Australia, which a lot of people think is actually quite close to Australia.
Yeah. I mean, you can you access Antarctica from the southern tip of Tasmania?
You can, and people do go there. A lot of research leaves straight from Tassie, but you access a completely different part of Antarctica. And the way that Antarctica is shaped, it's kind of like an inverted comma. So it's kind of got like a bit sticking out, which is called the Antarctic Peninsula.
Right.
And very coincidentally, that peninsula is pointing towards South America. So it's 2 days there and back from South America, but it's about 5 or 6 days if we wanted to go from Tassie to Antarctica. So it's actually a lot further. And it made more sense, bizarrely, for me to fly to South America to go to Antarctica than leaving straight from here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I did understand that that's the way most people go is via South America. I just figured maybe there's a way to get there from Tasmania. And there is, but it's just not the same. It's not the same if you want to go and see the wildlife, I imagine. Did you see some incredible wildlife?
Yeah, and you're exactly right, too. The peninsula is probably the most traveled to part of Antarctica, and it's also the most populated with penguins and whales and seals like that. So that's partly another reason why people go to the peninsula, because you see so much. Whereas if you leave from Tassie or from New Zealand as well, you're unlikely to see as greater diversity as you would at the peninsula. And I'm very lucky to say that, boy, did I see a diverse amount of animals while I was there. So yeah, penguins and seabirds and whales and seals. We saw it all, which was absolutely incredible.
Wow. I know I've been following you on Instagram and seeing some of the photos you've been posting lately. Just incredible. Like the fact that you took all those photos yourself, they look like something out of National Geographic or these incredible close-ups with rare creatures that, like I said, most people will never even see. And you're just posting them on Instagram stories like, oh, yeah, I saw this seal and saw this penguin.
Here's me with a leopard seal. Here's me with a humpback whale, yeah. And that's Antarctica, right? That's how incredible it is. And it also depends which season you go, which animals you'll see, and sort of what stage in their adulthood or development that you'll see as well. So if you go earlier in the season, around kind of October, November, you might see penguin courtship, so them getting ready to mate, or they're actually mating. A little bit later, you might see the eggs that have been laid, and then a little bit later again, by the time that I went there, the eggs had already hatched, and the chicks are running around, being baby penguins, adorable and just absolute nuisances for the parents, right? So kind of depends which season you go, what animals you will see, and it kind of dictates when you go and what you want to see. So if you want to see whales, go in February. If you want to see mating penguins, go in October and November. So there's kind of something for everybody depending when you go in the season. But doesn't matter when you go, you're going to see something incredible.
I want to go.
Yep.
Is it expensive? It's expensive, right?
It is very expensive, yes. And there's lots of different tour operators that you can go with, and they can go from sort of staying in like a 3 or 4 bed room on a ship to having the most luxurious suite with a marble ensuite, right? So you can it's an incredible sort of spectrum on how much money that you can spend to get there. But at the end of the day, it is expensive. It can range from $10,000 for a kind of 9-day, 10-day trip all the way up to, $60,000 or $70,000. So depending on, how much money you have that's disposable, again, that's something to think about when you're planning a trip to Antarctica.
And you paid for it all from your own pocket, right? You didn't get funded by some research this time around. Hopefully next time.
Exactly. So this time again, I'm very privileged to be able to afford it out of my own pocket. But yes, again, hopefully, in the future, I might be able to go back down as a science communicator. Maybe we can beam a little podcast from the Antarctica Peninsula as our third chat. Let's
wrapped up in like jackets.
Exactly. Let's put that as the goal for, maybe 2025 or something.
I love that.
But yes, I was very privileged to be able to afford it myself. A lot of people aren't, but yeah, a lot of people also go with research vessels, or they go with professional development trips. Homeward Bound is a really famous one that goes there as a woman and non-binary personal development sort of trip that goes towards the end of each year, I think. So there are options sort of for research, for personal development, and just for kind of general tourists as well.
Yeah, incredible. I've always wanted to get a job down in Antarctica, but listings are hard to come by, and they're usually very specific, not really my skill set. Anyway, that all sounds great. That's enough about the logistics. You said it changed you, like Antarctica changed you in some way? Like, what did you learn? You've come back. You must have some message you want to share or spread. Like, what's going on down there? What do we need to know?
A lot is going down in Antarctica. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It's a very dynamic place, particularly now with climate change. And one of the good things about the company that I went with was that we spend a lot of time with Antarctic guides, and they're people that have been going back and forth from Antarctica for years. Some of them have been to Antarctica 50, 60 times. So they know Antarctica like the back of their hand. And some of them are marine biologists, some of them are ornithologists, some of them are glaciologists. So they know a lot of science and a lot of sort of behind-the-scenes stuff that a lot of people don't really think or talk about. They talk to you directly about that because often they're the people researching it, for example. So getting to learn firsthand from the people that are there doing the research and that have seen things change over time is so fascinating. And being able to engage with those people brings you in so much more into the narrative on things like sea ice, for example, or penguin number changes over the years. So not only was it, very pretty to look at, which of course everybody knows Antarctica is going to be very pretty and very grand and beautiful, but we also get sort of the other side of this. And, as I guess an example, it was a very beautiful day one day for us, so much so that it was warm enough and calm enough for us to have a barbecue on our boat, which sounds incredible. And it was. However, that's kind of a warning sign. Antarctica shouldn't be that warm. It shouldn't really be that calm. Of course, there are kind of sporadic moments where it is. Maybe we caught one, but those very kind of calm, sunny, warm days are becoming more and more frequent. And again, that's something that the guides talk to us about. So being there and experiencing it as a tourist and then getting told sort of the science on what's happening, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you're kind of left with this feeling that, oh my God, Antarctica really is changing. It may be beautiful for me, but it's too warm for the penguins. It's too warm for the whales. We're not meant to be there, and it's very warm for us, but it's not kind of the environment that Antarctica should be.
We're definitely not supposed to be having barbecues in Antarctica.
No. Exactly, we're not supposed to be, but we're able to, and that's the thing. Like last year, we've recorded the highest temperature ever in Antarctica, and it was 20 degrees. 20 degrees
that sounds lovely.
It sounds lovely. It's beautiful, and it's terrible at the same time, right?
When I think of barbecues, I think of warm, sunny days, wearing a t-shirt and shorts, hanging out with friends, kicking the footy, listening to music, maybe playing on a slip and slide. None of that stuff should be associated with Antarctica, except maybe hanging with friends, if your friends were penguins. And I guess the slip and slide could be slipping down the side of an iceberg. But you do not want to end up in that water. Anyway, what's my point? Antarctica is getting warmer, and as you will soon hear, that is less than ideal.
Everybody thinks of Antarctica as this very windy, cold. It is the coldest, windiest, highest, and driest continent on the planet. But when you go in summer like we did, we see very little of that. There were times where I was walking around in a t-shirt, which is crazy to think. There's images and videos of penguins and seals panting because it's so warm.
Right.
So going there and seeing everything firsthand and hearing from all of the experts there, it really does sort of give you a bit of perspective on what's happening down in Antarctica, because it's often not told enough or not seen enough. We've got Frozen Planet 2 and Blue Planet 2, David Attenborough, all of these amazing documentaries go down there, but seeing it in person it's just completely different.
Yeah, and it's so far away as well. It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. Like we said, most people will never go to Antarctica. Most people, you just don't think about it. It's not like your next trip to Bali or Mexico or whatever. It's like it is quite an exclusive place to go. And as a result, we're not thinking about it.
Yeah, it's very much out of sight, out of mind. People don't realize how important Antarctica is to us and to the planet. We know it's a very cold and windy and dry and high place, but how does that affect me? How does that affect us at all? So, these are big questions that thankfully were able to be answered by the guides, because they are so incredibly knowledgeable and passionate and are able to answer these questions. And we often come away with more questions, how do we help? And oh my God, how do we communicate all of this stuff? So yeah, it is. I've definitely come away with a newfound kind of respect about the importance of Antarctica in our lives, I think, as well.
Incredible. And so to ask the obvious question, how is Antarctica affecting us? Why is it so important for myself to care and do something about Antarctica because it's so far away?
Yeah. Well, a couple of I'll touch on a couple because there's probably 1,000 different reasons, but the ones that stick out to me, one being the most obvious, is that Antarctica sort of regulates the greenhouse effect in the planet, and it regulates or thermoregulates the planet because it is so vastly covered in ice, which being predominantly white, that means it reflects a lot of the light back out into space through albedo, which is that characteristic of lighter coloured anything, really. So Antarctica being so enormous and so covered in ice and very white, it reflects a lot of that light back, which regulates our planet. So it does sort of prevent us from getting too hot too quick.
Yeah, this albedo word, honestly, when you first told me about it, I'd never heard of it, but it's like the fraction of light reflected from a surface. So another way to think about that is like if you have a white car, for example, on a sunny day, or a black car. If you have a black car and you get inside the car, it's so hot because it absorbs all the heat, but the white car reflects a lot of that heat away, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it works, and that's exactly what happens in Antarctica. And
it's a giant white car reflecting a lot of that sun heat on the Earth. It reflects it back and stops us from getting so damn hot.
Exactly. And it stops the penguins from getting so hot and the whales from getting so hot and the seals, everything that lives there. It regulates and looks after them just by the nature of it being white and reflecting so much heat back out to space. But what we see with climate change, that we're very rapidly warming up the planet. And it sort of starts this vicious kind of feedback loop of if the more ice that we melt, it exposes more of the darker coloured surface of Antarctica underneath all of that ice. And the more darker colours we have, the warmer it gets, so more ice melts. If more ice melts, we get more ground that's darker. So it becomes just this
vicious
terrible feedback loop of once it starts melting, it just really kicks into another gear and melts and melts and melts, which will be disastrous for temperature in this case, but also for the animals that live on the ice, like the penguins. Without the sea ice, they've got nowhere to live and breed and rest and things like that. So we've seen, I think, 3 years in a row now, record low sea ice levels. So it's getting worse and worse and worse each year.
So I did a deep dive into the chilling records of Antarctic sea ice, and here's what I found. Basically, every year, the ice forms around Antarctica in wintertime and thaws and melts around summertime. Scientists track how much sea ice forms every year, and in September of 2023, the amount of Antarctic ice was a whopping 17 million square kilometres. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but it's actually really bad. At the same time 10 years earlier, Antarctica had over 20 million square kilometres of sea ice. That's a loss of 3 million square kilometres of ice in just 10 years, or 15%. If that rate of ice loss continues, we're going to have some serious problems.
And so not only is it, less ice affecting penguins just because there's nowhere for them to live and sit and rest and breed, but the sea ice and the icebergs that are floating around in the water as well is exactly where krill also breed and live. And krill is probably the most important nutrient source or food source in Antarctica. So basically everything eats it. It's the bottom of the food pyramid. So, penguins eat them, seals eat them, whales eat them, even some other like seabirds eat them. Basically everything eats them. And if there's less sea ice, that also means less krill. So less krill, that means, all of these animals are either they're going hungry or they're having to hunt for a greater amount of time because they don't have enough energy. So they need to hunt more. And then because they're dedicating more time to hunting, that means they're also dedicating less time to things like mating and breeding. So that will then push out those normal breeding and mating cycles later and later in the year. So we think that because, what we see, the association between lower krill levels or lower sea ice levels and then lower krill levels also means poor reproductive success in a lot of these species. So less krill, less food, less time to breed. And then once the eggs are laid and the chicks are hatched, it's too late in the season. They're not going to last the winter.
Yeah, right.
So it's, again, this whole chain of events that happens, just from one thing happening, sea ice goes, the whole food pyramid is going to collapse. It can be a real disastrous effect all throughout Antarctica.
Freaky. I missed a key point there. Why does less ice mean less krill? How does krill relate to? They live in the ice, or are they?
So they live under the ice. They sort of live in like the nooks and crannies that are sort of under the icebergs and under the ice sheets, which is the ice sheet is the essentially the part of like the end part of the glacier that's sitting on the ice. So the krill live and breed around the ice. So if there's no ice, then there's no place for them to live and breed as well, just like the penguins.
Yeah, right. And I think I could be wrong, but the krill are also involved in carbon fixation, right? Like, don't they also eat a lot of algae and like microorganisms that absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere?
Yeah.
So they're getting rid of the carbon dioxide, which is helping climate change.
Yeah.
And then they turn it into, well, they excrete it basically into the ocean. But that like takes it out of the atmosphere and puts it into a solid deep down in the ocean.
Yeah.
But less krill means less carbon fixation, which means more warming, which means less ice, which means less krill.
Exactly. You know, how many negative feedback loops can there be, you know, just by the ice disappearing? And we've only spoken about how that affects the krill and the animals in Antarctica, right? You're exactly right. You know, krill are great carbon sequesters, and same with whales, because whales eat such an enormous amount of krill. So when a whale poos, actually, it's an enormous food source for things like algae and really small kind of microorganisms, even some birds. But it also then sinks to the bottom and then feeds all those animals at the bottom. But it is so full of carbon as well that it just sits at the bottom and pulls it away from the surface and prevents some of that warming too. So krill, you know, whales, whale poo in particular, are great at like removing some of that carbon that's free in the ocean as well, which will then prevent things like, or I guess help to mitigate, you know, some of that warming that we see so much.
And here I didn't think we'd be talking so much about whale poo today. There you go. So I want to talk more about whales in a minute, but what is there's no one solution, I'm sure, but what's something that people could do right now to say, I want to help Antarctica, I want to stop the ice from melting? Where do you begin?
Yeah. And there are so many little things that we can all do, and they're often the same things that we can do to save the Amazon, to save our local endemic species. You know, it is just living a more sustainable life. It's eating less meat. You know, red meat in particular has an enormous carbon footprint. So simply by eating less meat, we're going to be sort of, I guess, putting less demand on that industry and less emissions, switching to, you know, more green soaps and detergents and taking more public transport. You know, lots of these are really small changes that we can make, but I feel like we've been banging on about these things for decades, right? We've been saying this for a long, long time, and I don't think it's really got to us enough because, like what you said before, Antarctica is so out of sight, out of mind, whereas if we've got animals and nature that's really kind of dying and going away on our doorstep, it might sort of convince us a little bit more to do these things. But, you know, there's also so many organizations that are working in protecting, for example, like whale migratory routes called like Humpback Highway, for example, on the east coast of Australia. So, you know, making marine sanctuaries there so that whales can move freely, basically. You know, there's the WWF and Greenpeace, Australian Marine Society. There's so many different organizations that are out there working in this space. So if you feel like, you know, you personally can't get out there and you can't, you know, join the WWF on their trip to Antarctica, for example, they, on their websites, list so many different things that you can do, whether that is just donating to them, you know, $2 a month, a week, you know, it's $100, whatever it is, that's fantastic.
Every little bit counts.
Every little bit counts. And even there's a lot of citizen science as well that a lot of people can do, which is where people that aren't traditionally trained as a scientist help out in a lot of these projects or help out in science in some way. Like a lot of it involves tracking animal numbers or tracking plant numbers and where they are and when, things like that. So you can actually, in a lot of places in the East Coast and West Coast, you can just look from the shore and see whales. You know, you can pop it into an app and say, I saw this whale on this day. Yeah. This is really, really helpful information. You know, we need to know where the animals are at what time to know how to save them.
Totally. It's just like a simple observation that you might do and be like, huh.
Yeah.
And then if you just take it one step further and share that
exactly
on the app or on the website or whatever, you're contributing to science.
Absolutely. You know, there's local ones here in Victoria. I think it's called Sea Dragon Search, where they encourage, you know, snorkelers and divers to take a photo of a sea dragon or a seahorse as well, I think. You can upload both of them on there, and then they've all got their unique IDs, so we know who's where and what and when and things like that. And it's exactly the same with whales. There's an app called Happy Whale, where you can upload the whale fluke or the tail of the whale, which is kind of like a fingerprint for every whale. Every whale is identifiable by their tail.
They've got like really unique shapes, characteristics, maybe like little marks.
Yeah, little marks. There's barnacles. There's kind of all of these scratches and things like that. Every tail is unique in the whale world. So even on our trip down to Antarctica, we actually saw a whale that had never been seen before down there, which is always super exciting.
Oh, wow.
Right? We've found a new whale and we've tagged it now at this place at this time. And then now, hopefully, since that's in the database, we might be able to see, it's going into the East Coast, or it's going to Tonga, it's going to the WA. And, a lot of this is such useful information, because if we don't know where the whales are going, for example, how are we going to lobby our politicians to prevent, these gas and oil reserves opening up in points in the oceans, such as the Great Ocean Road? There's a proposal to do seismic blasting, which is essentially searching for oil and gas. So how do we pitch the government to say, hey, this is a pretty bad idea because it's affecting the whales, if we don't know where the whales are?
Whoa. I live on the Great Ocean Road, so this is extra important to me. But I've never heard anything about seismic blasting here. I don't even know what seismic blasting is. Turns out it's when large ships move around the ocean, blasting these insanely loud sounds into the seabed in order to try and find oil and gas buried under the ocean. Now, there's a few problems here. First off, why waste resources looking for fossil fuels when everybody knows we should be transitioning to renewable energy sources? Second, those blasts are 256 decibels. Do you know how loud that is? It's similar to the sound emitted from the detonation of an atomic bomb, and it's happening every few seconds for days on end. Imagine being a sea creature and hearing that sound. You would actually crap your pants. Luckily, you don't have pants because you're a sea creature. But still, that'd be scary as hell.
And just in general, that sounds like not the most sustainable or kind thing to do. To nature in general.
Exactly. Yeah, seismic blasting, it's not fun. It's incredibly loud, just these huge pulses of sound to search out on the seafloor where fossil fuels are, basically. But, these are often where the whales are breeding and calving, and you can imagine how stressful that's going to be for a pregnant mother. So obviously we want to try and lobby against that, or try and put in measures in place so that we don't, affect them in that way. But again, how do we know without citizen scientists, for example, telling us where the whales are and when? We need to know this information. So there's actually quite a lot of things that we can do. We've just got to take that sort of first step in, even opening up Google and being like, how do I help the whales? Or go to WWF and shoot them an email, writing to your politicians saying, I really stand for, like your local MP. I feel like maybe seismic blasting in the Great Ocean Road probably isn't a good idea for these reasons, Yeah. Lots of little things that we can do. You don't have to be the marine biologist down in Antarctica doing all this incredible research. You can do really little things from home too.
Totally. And I imagine that most people listening might be thinking, I'm just one person. The little things I do, if I eat less meat or whatever, it's not going to make a difference. But if everyone does it, it all adds up and is going to make an enormous difference. And I just want to try and summarize a few of the ideas that you put forward there. If you are listening and you want to do something to help the planet, to reduce carbon change, to help Antarctica, to save the whales, to stop having these ridiculously hot days. You don't have to be thinking about the penguins getting hot in 20 degrees in Antarctica. You can think about that 40-plus degree day in the city. And
absolutely.
It's not comfortable for anyone. No one likes that. And in part, that's our fault for the way that we live. And so some things that we can do, like you said, just be more mindful about living sustainably, doing little things like turning off the light when you leave a room, eating less meat. You don't have to eat absolutely no meat, although that would help, but eating less animal products in general because of the agriculture industry, less transport. We know the transport industry is really bad. Yeah. So things like riding your bike.
hanging your clothes out to dry instead of using your dryer. You know, these are little things little easy decisions that we can make that help in big ways. You know, one thing that I also didn't mention is that one step below on that food pyramid below krill is plankton or phytoplankton and zooplankton. Zooplankton being the animal form of plankton and then phyto being the plant form. We owe every second breath that we take every single day to the oxygen produced by microalgae and phytoplankton. And a huge amount of that phytoplankton lives in Antarctica. So if the phytoplankton goes because it's too hot, we quite literally won't be able to breathe. It's going to be a pretty dramatic change.
Right. So that just means it's all the more important that we do these things, take these little steps, little lifestyle changes that anyone can do, and it's not really going to affect how you live, but it is going to have an overall big effect on the planet, as well as that things like you said, these organizations that are doing their research, doing and making the changes, we can be helping them out, either via donations or through the citizen science like you suggested. And I'm going to put some key organizations that you can look into and potentially donate to or get involved with in the show notes of this description of this episode, so you can go and have a look and do your bit. You can do it right now or as soon as this episode finishes. Yeah, wait till the episode finishes. But I'll put some information in the show notes. And I think the last thing you mentioned is like your votes and the politicians. And, you know, just think about who you're voting for and what's their stance on the environment. Are they promoting seismic blasting and looking for coal and gas when we should be steering away from those and heading towards renewables? Or are they doing their bit? We want to be voting for people that are thinking about these things and thinking about the future, the long term, you know, trying to bring the world back into balance and not keep pushing for economic growth, which, I don't know, I don't want to get too political here. But,
but yeah, you're right.
You need to be thinking about these things and you know, voting intelligently.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we need to be informed voters. We can't just vote for kind of last minute and we don't really know who to choose, so we'll just choose person A over person B for no real reason. You know, we've got a real responsibility to make a really key decision and, you know, in I guess forming what the future looks like, and you're looking at politicians, whether it's your local MP or actually voting for the federal government, you know, who's going to be the next prime minister. You know, these decisions matter. And writing to your local MP, you know, you'd be surprised at how many people do believe in, you know, looking after the environment and things like that. There's so many petitions out there, and once they get, you know, a certain number of signatures and things like that, they have to go and be voted on.
So I feel like writing to politicians is something that not many people would do, especially young people. I mean, imagine sitting down with a pen and paper, trying to plan out what you would say, finding the right address, heading to the post office, paying postage, and it'll probably never even get read. Sounds painful, why bother? Well, forget that. Here's how you actually do it. Google my local member of parliament, or something like that, and you'll find who has the power in your local area. And they've likely got a website, and that website likely has a contact page. Nowadays, you can find a politician, draft a quick message, and instantly send it to them in less than a minute. It doesn't have to be this big, difficult, formal process. Just do a quick search and send a quick message. Chances are somebody will read it, and they just might listen to you.
So lending your voice is actually super, super powerful.
Incredible words. Thank you so much, Jarrod, for sharing this story of yours and just reminding us to do good things in the world.
Yeah, think about your place on the planet a little bit and try and do as much good as you can.
Absolutely. Can we talk a little bit more about whales? Because I feel like you've seen some whales recently, and whales are interesting and beautiful, majestic creatures. How are they doing down in Antarctica?
It kind of depends on the species. So whaling, as everybody knows, it's a word that kind of sends, you know, a shiver down your spine. Like, it's such a terrible industry, and it's decimated whale populations all over the world for centuries, really. And Antarctica is no different. So one of the final day on our trip, actually, we went to a place called Deception Island, which sounds super spooky, and it was. So it was it's an active volcano, and it is an ex-whaling station as well.
Wow.
So not only did we see the beautiful blues and whites, pristine colours of Antarctica, we also went to this really moody kind of, honestly, quite depressing place. But that's a part of Antarctica, and that's part of its past. You know, there were tens of thousands of whales that were killed every year for centuries in Antarctica.
Wow.
And a lot of the species just haven't recovered still. So there was an international whaling ban in 1982, I think it was. Commercial whaling ban, so that's across the entire planet. And that was only 40 odd years ago. So that gives about 40 generations of whale reproduction, basically. So it gives them a good chance, fingers crossed, to recover, but some species just can't because of situations like the lack of krill, meaning there's, more, they got to hunt more and they've got less time for reproduction and breeding and mating, all these things. So some animals are doing better than others. I think humpback whales are a true success story, conservation success story, particularly in Australia. There's been a lot of regulation. The Environmental Protective Act has really championed humpback whales. So we've got, I think, 40,000 animals on the east coast of Australia, just on the east. And then there's a whole bunch on the west as well. And there's some in New Zealand and there's some in Tonga. So that was really great improvement in 40 years. Whereas if you look at the right whales, the southern right whales, there's still only 2,000 or 3,000 left. So they only had, 100 or 200 40 years ago when whaling stopped. So some of them are really struggling to recover. Some of them are doing a bit better because we have these laws. We have put humpback whales, they've become such an iconic species. So people talk about them, we go diving with them, we lobby our politicians and say, hey, we care about whales, we should save them. And this is what happens. The humpback whale has come back from this terrible history again, completely because of us, but it's also because of us that they're coming back.
Right.
So humpback whales are doing pretty good, but other species still struggling because they don't have as much support as some of the other species do, I think.
Yeah, right. And like you were saying before, with less sea ice and less krill, that means less food for whales. So I imagine that maybe whales, are they starving, or maybe they're not having enough, not being able to become pregnant and produce calves, which obviously is super important for furthering the
Yeah, exactly right.
species.
And it's not only Antarctica as well, it's in the Arctic as well. So essentially the whales kind of pattern of migration throughout the world is they feed in the poles, because that's after a big summer and autumn, all the krill has just blown up in population. So the whales head to the poles, absolutely gorge themselves, and then they go back to the tropics to breed and to calve as well. So that's why we see them off the east coast and west coast of Australia, but then they disappear sort of at our summertime. So, yeah, when there is less krill, there is a direct relationship between whale pregnancies and calving rates. So that could be a reflection of not enough krill, like you said, so there's not enough time to breed or not enough energy to breed. Or it's kind of what I said a bit earlier with the penguins and how the breeding season has been pushed a couple of months ahead or a couple of months early as well. So whales are sometimes giving birth on their migration back to Australia, for example. And that's a 2-month journey for a whale to swim from Antarctica to Perth, for example. And that's a big ask for a calf to do.
Yeah.
So even though some animals may be calving, and, that's, I guess, a successful pregnancy in one way, the calves may not be surviving that journey because it's just too much for them to do.
Yeah, right. Oh.
Yeah, it's a bit sad, but again, this is one of the sad state of affair that's kind of in Antarctica, and it's the same with penguins too. We've seen a 10% reduction in emperor penguin numbers over 10 years, and we think that's also related to krill and the amount of sea ice. So less places to breed, less krill around, more time to feed, and it's affecting all the animals in that food chain, really. So some animals are doing okay, but many, many are not.
That's terrible. And I know that from our last episode, I think you mentioned that penguins are some of your favorite animals. So
They are.
It's horrible to hear that the penguins are struggling with less ice and reductions in population numbers. And am I correct in saying that avian flu is a risk as well?
Yes, there is another threat because Antarctica, of course, needs more challenges, right? So avian flu is a virus that's been around, it's gone around the entire planet. It's present in every continent except Australia, bizarrely.
Oh, wow.
Hasn't quite landed in Australia yet. It may be, we just haven't found it. We haven't tested for it. So it was discovered in 2021. Again, we were going through our own pandemic, but the birds of the world were also going through their version, right? They were going through avian flu. We were going through COVID-19. They were going through avian flu. So eventually, over the years, it's migrated all around the world because birds migrate. That's part of what they do. They fly south for the winter sort of thing.
Yeah.
So in doing that, they bring the virus with them to new locations, and then it breeds and infects more birds, and it sort of spreads around. And it doesn't affect only birds too. It affects the animals that eat the birds as well. So I think in February, actually it was the second day of our own trip in late February where the first positive case of avian flu was recorded in Antarctica on the peninsula. It may not be the first case there, but it was the first case that we've found, which could really spell a disaster, really. It could be one of the largest ecological disasters of our time. If it reaches some of these penguin colonies that number in the millions, it could really wipe them out pretty quickly. But we just don't know how the virus functions in Antarctica. It's so cold and dry and things like that. We don't know how it's going to move through the populations, but if, the rest of the world is any sort of measure, it could be pretty disastrous.
That's freaky to think about, the idea of, because we all know that penguins, they huddle together in masses, thousands, millions of penguins together. So if there was some sort of penguin pandemic, that could be really bad.
Yeah.
So,
if you think of, we had to social distance to prevent, COVID-19 spreading, try tell a penguin to social distance when they're in a colony of 1 million breeding pairs. So
yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
It's not going to happen, and we can't really stop that spread between birds as, we don't have a lot of options for that.
No, I was about to say, I don't know if there's much that you or I can do to help the penguins at this stage. What the tourism companies are doing, so there's actually a regulator called the International Association of Tour Operators, and they regulate how all of the tour companies work in Antarctica. So they put rules and regulations in place on where and when you can't go, how close to animals you can be at what time, and if you're on land versus in the water, it's different again. So they're going to sort of increase their regulations as time goes by, And the years before me, you used to be able to camp on Antarctica. You used to be able to actually sleep there overnight. That is now, I think, completely off the cards because we don't want to be the vector. We don't want to bring avian flu with us to the penguins and then leave it on the ice and they're waddling around and they'll get it from us. So,
can you imagine camping in Antarctica? I mean, I can't think of a worse place to set up camp. It's the coldest, driest, windiest place on the planet. Hey, I've got an idea. Let's set up a thin, flimsy structure and spend the night out here. Why? Ugh. There are so many good reasons to not camp on the ice in Antarctica.
There are steps that the tour operators can take by limiting how much contact we have with land and how close we are to animals and things like that. But outside that, try telling migratory birds to stop migrating. That's probably the biggest issue.
And try telling viruses to stop evolving and changing their genetics to be prime for infection.
Exactly.
It's risky business. I want to step away from Antarctica for a minute. As incredible as it is, Jarrod, you just gave a TEDx talk. That's incredible. Can you tell us about that?
I can, yeah. It was definitely one of the hardest speaking events or gigs that I've done in my SciComm career, and it's kind of like the penultimate test of you as like a communicator, right? It's one of these huge names in science communication or just communication in general. So I was, really, really happy that I found out that I got a place to be a speaker, and my presentation was actually more similar to what we spoke about last time. So a little bit more about my PhD, female reproductive health, why we know what we don't know and what we can do to sort of plug those gaps and things like that. So I was on a speaking panel, I think, of 11 speakers, and everybody was different. We all spoke about different things, and the theme was rebels and renegades as well, which I think was super cool.
Yeah.
So some really awesome talks about people, challenging society and changing perceptions of things and doing things differently. So I think it was a really powerful day. It was a long day, but a very, the messages were fantastic, I think, from everybody. All of the speaking events that I've done in the past, generally, of course, I have speaking notes, for my presentations and chatting with yourself, of course. But this is, 100% memorized script word for word, which is completely foreign to me and many of the other speakers as well. So
you must have practiced hundreds of times.
Oh, hundreds of times. My dog had heard my speech back to front, so many times. So a lot of practice. It was only one night, but it's probably, 6-7 months of work of writing the speech and tweaking it and working with the co-conveners and editors and tweaking it, making it a little bit better. And then where do you put your emphasis? Where do you kind of underline and where do you do your pauses and things like that? So there's a lot that actually goes into delivering the speech when it has to be memorized too.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, congratulations for doing that. I'm sure it was an incredible talk, and I can't wait for it to pop up online. I know it takes a few months for it to actually come out so other people can see it, but if you want a little taste, you can definitely go back and listen to our previous episode where you probably talked about some similar concepts.
Definitely. That'll be a good teaser.
Nice. Are there anything that you would recommend for listeners to check out in terms of like books, documentaries, or Instagram accounts, for example? Any inspiration you've seen lately that you'd like to share with listeners?
Yes, actually, I've only just started reading this book probably 3 days ago or 2 days ago because it just hit the shelves and became, for sale. And it's a book called, I mentioned the term before, Humpback Highway. So it's called Humpback Highway, and it's written by a wildlife scientist and another TEDx speaker as well. Her name is Dr. Vanessa Perrotta, and she is incredible. She is a wildlife scientist, whale researcher. She's the one going to Antarctica, flying the drones around, taking samples of the water and checking for krill and monitoring whale migrations and things like that. And a lot of her experiences are put into this book, and it's just so fascinating hearing from, again, it's similar to my experience in Antarctica, hearing from all the guides and the researchers that are there. We need things that are accessible to us to sort of connect us with whales in this case.
Yeah.
And I think this book is great. It's a really easy read. It's really accessible. It's interesting. So I would totally recommend checking out Humpback Highway for sure. And I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different organizations out there with a lot of amazing content online, particularly related to krill. I think sea shepherd, which is a term that probably used to be in a lot of people's memory from their show Whale Wars that used to be on Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
But they're still around. They're still saving all of the whales and the dolphins, sea life in general, really. And they've got a new movie, I think it is, or a documentary coming out. And it's all about the krill fishing industry.
The documentary is called The Return to Antarctica, and it's part of the 10th annual Ocean Film Tour. As of April 2023, you can only see the trailer online, but it looks awesome, and hopefully The Return to Antarctica becomes more widely available soon.
So a lot of that is happening in Antarctica, and they really shine a light again on something that we didn't really know about.
Another one of those things that most people probably don't think about, krill. It's like, yeah, krill is something that lives in the ocean.
Yeah.
That's kind of, that's where you leave it. But the fact is that they're super important, and they are being fished and overfished.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is causing detriment to so many other species.
Yeah, it's what makes our salmon pink. It's in our omega-3 supplements. Doesn't need to be, but it's just another way that companies can, get a omega-3 source. So again, something, to take away is to look at some of the products that you're buying, and if you see anything with krill, please avoid it. Please avoid it. Please avoid it.
Save the krill.
Save the krill.
Save the whales by saving the krill.
Yes.
What are your plans now? What's next for Dr. Mac?
More conversations like this, I think are so needed. We need to keep talking about Antarctica, sing for it when it can't. And we need to keep shining lights on things that are far removed from us and that actually affect us, like we've spoken about all this talk today. I would love, 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 love to go back to Antarctica. And, it is such an enormous trip, and you do have to make it worthwhile, which is why I'm doing all of this speaking circuit, going around trying to educate people about Antarctica and how to live a better life and things like that. I would love to go back as one of those guides or a presenter. And
we'll get there. We've got to do our third episode from Antarctica.
Exactly. See? So that is definitely on my radar, whether that's 2024 or 25 or 2030. Who knows? It's on the radar. It's definitely something I want to do. And, I just want to see more and talk more about whales and penguins. Everybody loves them. Everybody loves hearing about them. But we don't often really talk about the sad side, which we really need to know about.
Absolutely. Well, please keep spreading the word, talking all about it. I do have a few listener questions for you, if you've got a moment to answer those.
Let's go.
Before that, though, Every week here on Travelling Science, we make a donation to a charity of the guest's choosing. And this week, Dr. Jarrod McKenna has chosen to donate to Sea Shepherd, an awesome foundation that is doing so many great things to save wildlife in the ocean and save Antarctica, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Big campaign on krill right now in that fishing industry. So I think it's a fantastic organisation and, could definitely use your support. So thank you.
Absolutely, yep. So we're making a donation to Sea Shepherd, and I'll put the link in the show notes below. If you'd like to make a donation as well, that would be absolutely incredible, and we totally appreciate you for making a change in this world, doing good things. But now, let's get into it. First question is from Cheryl Crowe. That's my mum. She's been interested in going to Antarctica for a little while.
Course.
So when I told her I was talking to you, she had to ask. She's considering visiting Antarctica, and she just wanted to know if you had any little travel tips for a solo traveler.
Yeah. Because I went as a solo traveler as well. I went through Intrepid Travel, and I think it was an incredible experience. They encourage solo travelers to go as well. You're not going to be there by yourself sitting solo the entire time at all. I made friends within the first day. So like-minded people go to Antarctica, and it's often for the same reasons as well. So you're going to find your people when you're there. But I think a good thing to I guess think about or look when you're choosing which group to go with is what type of people that they have on board, in terms of guides and researchers and things like that, but also, how sustainable that they are themselves, because it's an enormous footprint to go there. So if the organisation themselves is, looking to sort of mitigate their own footprint, I think that's definitely something to sort of look for. Yeah, it's a good sign that they're there for the right reasons.
Oh, that's good. That's reassuring to know that you'll meet your people and to think about the sustainability aspect of going there yourself. So there you go, Mum. And also, considering what you just said, the next listener question is from Slofie. She pointed out that couldn't the numerous ships visiting Antarctica be contributing to the damage to the ice or to the wildlife in the area? Like, is that a concern?
I mean, they absolutely are.
Yeah.
Like, if they weren't there, it would be better. But it's kind of a... you're on the balancing on the knife's edge. It's like, do zoos do more harm than good? By showing people animals, we engage them with animals so they are more likely to preserve them and think differently and things like that. So going to Antarctica is a very similar thing. So there's definitely pollution, there's definitely, noise and light and sound and obviously, pollution just from big diesel engines and ships going. It might be surprising to a lot of people, but 100,000 people go to Antarctica every year. That's a lot of people.
Wow.
It's about 50 ships worth. So it's actually a pretty big industry. And yes, they are definitely polluting and damaging in some ways. And that's sort of why I said before, try and find an organization or a company that is looking to mitigate their impact in some way, whether that is through the changes that they actually make on board. Maybe they're an all-vegan ship, something like that. Or they're looking to do offsets. Whether that is, actually a useful thing or not is kind of up to you. It's a little bit up in the air. But if they're trying to make their impact, they're trying to reduce their impact, I think that's a great thing. I think whether they, do more harm than good is probably a personal opinion. I personally think that they're still doing good, because on the trip after me, for example, were the WWF. So if it wasn't for these tour operators, they wouldn't be able to get down.
Right.
So they're also providing, a means for doing a lot of research. And like I mentioned before, a lot of citizen science research. We found a whale that, we didn't know was there before. So there is a lot of good that can come from these ships. Whether they do, more harm than good is probably a bigger debate, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, the education that they provide and the fact that people can come back and share their stories and that plight for Antarctica can have positive long-term effects.
Absolutely.
So something to think about. Final listener question is from Jan Mason, who wanted to know if is there a city in Antarctica or a village or is there any infrastructure down there? How do people live there?
So a yes and a no to that question. So first of all, Antarctica is actually a completely sovereign land. Nobody owns it. Nobody governs Antarctica as a country, for example. But there are a lot of research bases sort of dotted around the coast. So there's quite a lot on the peninsula because it's the easiest to get to.
Yeah.
But there's also ones kind of, directly south of Australia and New Zealand once they come straight down. So There are bases there. Some of them are a bit more high-tech than others. Some of them definitely need kind of a bit of upkeep and probably a refurbishment by now. But yes, the US base, I can't remember the name of it now.
It's called McMurdo Station, and it can house up to 1,500 people.
It's definitely a small town. It's quite a big base. There's like street lamps, there's roads, things like that. So I wouldn't say there's a city, but that particular base is really large. But of course, the emissions and everything that come with that base have to be justified. They do a lot of work there. All of the, or a lot of the energy, I think, is, completely carbon neutral, things like that. So while nobody owns Antarctica, a lot of people sort of have a base there to do a lot of research. So yes to the infrastructure, no to the cities with a question mark, I think.
Yeah. And I would imagine that most of the people that are living in Antarctica in those buildings are there to help Antarctica, to do research.
Exactly.
And to work together to maintain and promote survival of that whole part of the world.
Exactly. There was I think it's 1959, there was an Antarctic treaty that was signed by, at the time, 12 countries, I think, that all sort of had a stake in Antarctica. They all had a base or something like that there. And that treaty, they meet quite frequently, I think every year or every second year. And essentially it outlines what you can do and what you can't do in Antarctica. And it's one of the few places, and I love this quote, it's one of the few places or the only place on Earth dedicated to peace and science. So you can't have a war there. There's no military. Nobody owns it. Everything that happens in Antarctica is completely open and transparent. All the research is free to view. So these kind of small towns that sort of pop up in Antarctica to do all the research, there's a lot of good that comes from that too.
I love that. Incredible. Well, thank you so much for answering those listener questions, Dr. McKenna. And just to finish off, I've got a quick lightning round, if you're ready.
Let's go, yeah. I'm ready.
Alrighty. We'll go 6 questions, 60 seconds.
Okay.
Timer starts now. Was Antarctica crazy cold?
It wasn't as cold as I thought it was. We had a couple of days, maybe -1, but most days were probably 5 degrees, so kind of a cool Melbourne winter, I think.
It's a little bit concerning, but good to know. You were there in...
I was there in summer. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. If you could live in Antarctica and do some sort of research while you were there, would you do it? Would you live there?
100%. Whether I stay over winter is another question. A few researchers do stay over winter.
Oh, wow.
Because that research is, of course, needed as well. But maybe I'll start with summer and we'll see how we go.
Okay, fair enough. What was the number one? What was your favorite thing about visiting Antarctica?
The wildlife, seeing it up close was incredible. I did a kayaking trip, I guess, like on my expedition as well. So I got to go even closer to animals like whales and penguins. So a humpback and a calf, surfacing 5 meters from your kayak is, incredible.
That's like a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah.
What was the worst part? What was your least favorite part of visiting Antarctica?
My least favorite part was that I'll probably never go back again. Having that thought in my mind, like, this is just so incredible, and will I ever come back? And will I ever see something as beautiful as this again? I travel a lot, and I've set the bar too high.
That was like peak life. It's all downhill after this.
Pretty much, yeah.
What was your favorite animal in Antarctica?
The humpbacks, yeah. I mean, we were told that the whales were going to be there because it's summer and they're feeding, but, the frequency that we saw them and the closeness that we could get to them, absolutely blew my mind. So the humpbacks for sure.
Awesome. And final question, what is the number one thing that we should be doing to save the humpbacks?
Living more sustainably, and I'll also put a part 2, because I have to, is that, you've got to live sustainably, but also talk to your politicians, write and give your voice meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, try and make a difference. Well, Dr. Jarrod McKenna, you are an awesome reproductive biologist, science communicator, and TEDx speaker. You are spreading the good word around the world. You're sharing information that people need to know about. People don't often think about these things. People don't often even consider Antarctica, but for you to be able to go there, have a great time, and come back and tell everyone and share your stories and share your photographs it's really invaluable. It's so good for people to be learning about this stuff and making a change. So I appreciate you coming on Traveling Science today and sharing all of that with our listeners. just to finish off, considering everything we've discussed here today, if you had one final piece of advice for listeners to go out and make a difference in the world, what would that piece of advice be?
I think it would be to, just kind of ground yourself in your place in this world and maybe your own sort of footprint. We talk about me changing my eating habits isn't really going to do that much, because Taylor Swift is flying around all the time in her private jet. That's her footprint to deal with. That's not yours. Think about yourself, what you can change, have some control over how you treat this planet. So that's going to help you live more sustainably as well, I think.
So there you have it, legends. That was Dr. Jarrod McKenna, reproductive biologist, TEDx speaker, and Antarctic adventurer. What a good dude. He doesn't just go on holiday, he goes on this incredible expedition to the edge of the Earth, witnesses spectacular wildlife and scenery, and has a barbecue while he's there too. But then he comes back to remind us all that Antarctica may be far away. It may be something that you never consider, but it impacts us all. It regulates the temperature of our planet, and it's responsible for a lot of the oxygen that we breathe. But Antarctica and all of the wildlife in Antarctica are in serious trouble. So, like Jarrod said, think about your place on this planet and try to live more sustainably. Try writing to a politician. It's fast, easy, and effective. And consider getting involved with a charity that's supporting Antarctica and its wildlife. There's a bunch of links that I've put in the show notes just down below that you should check out, and you can start making a difference now. And also feel free to check out Dr. Mac's website or follow him on Instagram to see some of his mind-blowing photos from Antarctica. Also, as always, thank you so much for listening, legends. I appreciate you for spending some time with me today. Maybe consider leaving a review. That would be awesome. It'll help more people to find the Travelling Science podcast. And make sure you're subscribed for more Travelling Science every single Science Sunday. And follow Travelling Science on Instagram to see who we're interviewing next. And there you can send in your own listener questions. And if you're more visually oriented, check out the Travelling Scientist YouTube channel. And finally, if you stick around to the end of the episode, I always leave you with a little secret. This week's secret is that I found my new favourite ice cream store. It's in Melbourne and it makes some bizarre flavours. For example, the other night I got a scoop of Kalamata olive flavoured ice cream. And it sounds awful, but it was incredible. What else have they got? They've got like blue Gatorade flavour. I also tried salted licorice. I tried buttered baguette. Hang on. I took a photo of the menu so you can see. Where is it? Here we go. Listen to this flavor. Marshmallow, grape, aeroplane jelly, and pink salt. That's one ice cream flavor. Sour green apple juice, iceberg lettuce, sorbet. Iceberg lettuce sorbet? Oh, I tried this one. Miso, cinnamon, and white chocolate. Lovely. Also, Vegemite white chocolate. If you know what Vegemite is, you would think that that sounds like an awful flavor, but it was actually one of the best ones. Vegemite and white chocolate makes a wicked ice cream flavor. Listen to this one. Musk sticks and eclipse mints. Pork butter, chili oil, roasted toffee almonds. Ice cream. Crazy. This is the best ice cream place ever. If you're in Melbourne, hit me up. I'll tell you where it is and you can check these out. Because trust me, these flavors, mind-blowing. Salted chili pineapple coconut vinegar sorbet. Where do they come up with this stuff? It's crazy. Saffron, cardamom, rosewater condensed milk ice cream. What? Orange and poppy seed cake batter. Tawny port, prunes and butter. Sounds fancy. Salted lemon curd and salted crispy crackers. I swear, all these flavors, they taste incredible. Every one of them. Oh, I tried this one.